All right, welcome back to week 2 of our boundaries module. What do you do when you're in a red light? Well, you'll remember red light, we can also call triggered. You're triggered. Now, that is a triggering word. Some people use that like an insult, but I just mean that your nervous system or your mind or your emotions, whatever, are there. It's processing more than you can handle and stay in an empathetic and rational viewpoint. And there's a reason I pair those two together because they both involve taking new perspectives. So when we're in that stress brain, we tend to take the perspective that I have, and it's very hard to adopt a different vantage point. Well, to be a creative thinker, which is what our rationality is actually all about, or to be empathetic requires the ability to get out of one fixed viewpoint and adopt other perspectives. So we know we're in red, we're triggered because we are unable to adopt those other perspectives. So my suggestion to you for yourself and for those that you coach is when you hit that red, then you want to pause and step back. And so our last video was how to do that, how to ask for it from another with I statements. Next week, we'll talk about how to tell it to another if they're not responding to your I statements, but once again, this is the cool thing is like if you use last week's tactics and ask for yellow, then 90% of the conflict is already going to be taken care of. It's really cool. Then in that little 10%, if you use these I statements, then not 90% of that 10%, yeah, I think I could do math with a brain this sleepy, is also going to, so we only have this little 1% left, right? Where we really have to use some of these more dramatic tactics. Interestingly enough, just a tangent, not in my notes for today, but that's actually the percentage of the population which are sociopaths is just a little 1%. I can't cite the research, but I did research this once. I'm like, how many of us are sociopaths? The rest of us are actually willing to do give and take, but it usually requires these skillful, emotional, intelligent communication tools. So I got to ask for a pause. And because this is important to me, I want to bring my best self to the table. Okay. So, like we mentioned last time, and I'll reiterate, you make a schedule. Can we check in about this in 3 hours? Can we check in about this tomorrow? And in general, don't let 24 hours go without having some check in, right? I'll text you in 24 hours, and the text may say, still processing, but you're letting the person know you are reestablishing that inherent connection. And even for avoidant attachment island types like myself, we need that reestablishment because it's so easy when we're in conflict, when we're in triggering or challenging subject matter, it's so easy to assume that innate belongingness will be lost. And so, what we're doing is we are preemptively creating belonging. We're nourishing that respect for the other's inherent worth and dignity. This goes such a long way to just getting rid of conflict altogether. A lot of time we're battling for, can I have inherent worth and dignity? So when that's not even on the table, when that's not at stake, everything else, oh gosh, it flows so much more easily. Okay, so what are you going to do? You've successfully called red light, right? You forgot to call yellow, but now you've successfully called red. And you're like, oh, now I'm triggered and I got to check in with them tomorrow. You are going to go away and you are going to do the SCSC, self-care through self-compassion, kata. Well, why? Okay, here is a big secret. It's going to go in bold print in the notes. We get triggered because of a lack of empathy. We get triggered because of a lack of empathy. What does that mean? It means, like we talked about all last month, if you have enough spaciousness in your nervous system, you can withstand almost any story or sensation, right? There's a lot of research done, meditative trainings to help with anxiety, depression, chronic pain. What do? They create a lot of space, presence, and unconditional love and kindness around what's going on. So the proposal is if we had enough of that spaciousness, kindness, etc., around whatever's going on, we could integrate it, and then we'd still be uncomfortable, but we wouldn't be in red light, right? That means like you've been thrown beyond your limit. Now you're too angry to take another perspective. You're too scared to take another perspective. So Why we do the SCSC kata is usually in a conversation, if we've had to call red light, it's because we're not getting enough empathy from the other, and we can't bring enough empathy from within ourselves, right? So we need one or the other. A really good therapist, why that works is you can't bring enough empathy to yourself, but they bring empathy from outside. Or you could say presence or unconditional positive regard, or coherent narrative. I think they're all words for the same thing, right? A guru, if you have a real one that works for you, a functional guru, what they're doing is they're bringing that unconditional presence from outside, and that even if you can't do that yourself, you've gotten it from somewhere. And then you can do it for yourself. That's really cool. In other cases, people are dysregulated out here. You're with a stressful situation, but you have enough empathy from within you that you can stay in that situation untriggered. This is kind of the training, like, I'll often go off on Peter Levine's somatic experiencing, but this is one of the things that trains you to do, of pendulating into resource, filling up your well, and then pendulating into the stressful material, but learning to keep the resource with you. Then you can withstand a whole other range of emotions. So what we're doing when we've gone red and we are triggered, we are going to supply ourselves with that empathy. How are we going to do that? We're going to do the SCSC kata, self-compassion kata for short, self-care through self-compassion. And specifically, I want to recommend that you do this on paper. I will, maybe not right away, it might take me a minute, but I'm going to put a download in there of a little worksheet that you should print out and have on hand for when you are in the red. And what is this worksheet going to say? It's going to say, what are you telling yourself about this situation? Right? What do you put it in one sentence? What are you telling yourself about this situation? Okay. When you tell that story, how do you feel? And subtext, use the list, right? Okay. Well, you're feeling that way because what needs were unmet? Okay, here we go. And what requests would you make of the other person? What choices are you called to make in this situation? By the time you're done with that, usually we've developed enough presence to recognize, here are my stories versus here are my observations, not my objections. Here are my objections. Here are my observations. And then as well, instead of going, they're a betrayer, I'm feeling betrayed. They're this, I'm feeling that they're doing this. We go, no, what am I feeling? Well, I'm feeling scared. I'm feeling wary. And in that moment, what I have found is often the minute we get into actual feelings is where the insights will come up. Like you'll go, oh, I'm feeling scared. Oh man, just like the last three relationships I was in, you'll have the sense, oh shit, I'm so triggered because I'm afraid that the same thing is going to happen, that of course. And all of a sudden, the presence, have you had this happen? That insight, put it in the comment section below if you've had this happen, that insight of like, oh, I know where this is coming from. All of a sudden it'll ease. Like you may still be feeling scared, but there's all this presence around it. And it's like, it makes it so you can bear it. The minute you go into those needs, then you're like, oh my gosh, of course, I need health. I need to be understood. And we'll get the sense of like, oh man, I haven't been understood for as long as I can remember. And we'll recognize like places where we were trying to get that understanding from our partner, but we didn't know that's what we needed. And so we were asking for it in all these self-defeating ways. And we go like, oh, I needed to be understood. Got it. Okay, am I called to choose something? Am I called to request something? By the time you finish this, most often you have regulated yourself to the point where you may still be mad, you may still be scared, you may have a lot of unmet needs, you may need to make some requests, you may need to choose, but you're not flooded, you're not triggered, you're actually able to take other perspectives. Okay, then that leads to step two, which is, once you've gotten there for yourself and not before, once you've successfully empathized with yourself, you're going to do the SCSC kata for them. So now you're going to imagine, what do I imagine they are telling themselves? Or what observations are they making? What do I imagine they are feeling? What do I imagine they are feeling? What do I imagine they're needing? And then it's not your call, like, well, what should they be choosing or something like that. But you can go through the big three, and oftentimes this will soften even more that now you're stretching. Oh, I get it. They're acting that way because they need this. I've had just miraculous abilities to regulate my own nervous system, come back into connection and service to my partner by just going in, and like it doesn't work on its own. You have to go, what might they be feeling? And then you're like, oh man, she's probably feeling scared. Well, what's she needing? Oh, and our natural instinct to serve one another will come back up. Last point on this, that's how you know if you are out of red light. If you can do the other half of what might they be feeling, what might they be needing, then you know, it's safe to go back in. You're now in yellow light, right? Still cautious, whatever. But now you have the capacity to adopt another perspective. First, you brought presence to your own perspective, and writing it down is very important because it's objectifying it. It's harder to do inside. I used to like to do math problems in my head. I got in trouble and they're, show your work. Well, in this case, you're going to journal it because putting it outside creates, it's like a ritual. There's a symbolic separation. Oh, here's me generating presence, and then here's this stuff. You've adopted this other perspective, and then you adopt it for the other person. And this is what helps to bring you out of red light and let you know that you're out of red light. So, this is your protocol. We've now got how to call red light, what to do once you've successfully done that. Get out there. I'm going to give you a couple assignments soon, but I just want to download this information to you. It was earth shattering and transformative when I learned it. Have you learned this before? Is it as wild and weird as it was to me the first time I heard it? Let me know, and we'll talk to you soon.